If there is one thing that gets under my skin faster than a mosquito in July, it is the phrase verbal agreement. Whenever I hear those two words coming out of a contractor's mouth, I know exactly what's happening. I'm about to witness a masterclass in how to attempt to rob someone blind without a shred of evidence. It is the hallmark of the lazy, the incompetent, and the downright dishonest. Today, that particular brand of nonsense walked into my courtroom wearing a neon yellow polo shirt and a look of practiced confusion that would have been insulting if it weren't so utterly transparent. The plaintiff was a Mrs. Abigail Sterling, a woman whose kitchen looked like it had been through a small war. She had photos, dozens of them, showing exposed wiring, cabinet doors hanging off their hinges, and a countertop that looked like it had been cut with a dull butter knife. She was suing a Mr. Marcus Thorne, a man who called himself a general contractor, but based on the evidence presented, had the construction skills of a toddler with a set of plastic blocks. Mrs. Sterling was looking for $7,000 to rectify the renovation he had botched and abandoned halfway through. Mr. Thorne, for his part, was currently standing at the defendant's podium, vibrating with the kind of indignation that only the guilty possess. Your Honor, he started, his voice thick with a fake, aggrieved tone. This woman is trying to stiff me. We had a verbal agreement for an additional $5,000 of work beyond the initial quote. I did the extra labor, I sourced the materials, and now she's playing dumb. I stared at him. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence settle over the room, letting him hang there in the vacuum of his own lies. He started shifting his weight, his eyes darting toward the gallery. He was used to bullying his way through arguments with homeowners, but he wasn't going to bully his way through me. A verbal agreement, I said, my voice as flat and hard as a paving stone. Mr. Thorne, do you have any idea how many verbal agreements I've sat on this bench and listened to? Let me save you some time. A verbal agreement in this courtroom is worth exactly as much as the paper it's written on, which is to say, nothing. If you are a professional contractor, you provide a contract. You provide a scope of work. You provide an invoice. You don't walk into someone's home, start ripping apart their kitchen, and then hold the project hostage for more money because you had a verbal agreement in your head. It wasn't in my head, he squawked, his face turning a blotchy red. I had my crew working overtime. We did the backsplash. We did the custom island. I turned my gaze to Mrs. Sterling. She looked exhausted, but her resolve was rock solid. Mrs. Sterling, did you ever agree, verbally or otherwise, to an extra $5,000 for a custom island? Absolutely not, Judge, she said, her voice clear. He quoted me $12,000 for the entire project. He demanded $8,000 up front, which I paid. Then, 2 weeks in, he just stopped showing up, left the kitchen in that state, and started texting me demanding another $5,000 for materials and unforeseen complications. When I asked for an itemized list of what those complications were, he stopped answering my calls. I looked back at Thorne. Well, Mr. Thorne, where is this itemized list? Where are the receipts for these materials? I'm a reasonable person. If you can show me proof that you spend $5,000 on legitimate kitchen materials, I'll listen. If you can't, you're just a guy who tried to pull a bait and switch on a woman who trusted you? He stumbled. I bought everything in cash to save the client money on markup fees. That's standard industry practice. I felt my blood pressure tick up a notch. Cash? You bought $5,000 worth of kitchen materials in cash with no receipts? And you want me to believe this is standard industry practice? Do you take me for a fool, or are you just this arrogant? Which is it? He went quiet. The room was dead silent. He knew he'd stepped into a trap, but it was a trap he'd laid for himself. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my interlocked fingers. Let's get something straight right now. You are not a contractor. You are a grifter. You walk into people's homes. You exploit their lack of knowledge about construction, and you create a mess to create leverage. It's a classic shakedown, and you picked the wrong homeowner to pull it on. She's making it sound like I'm a criminal, he shouted, his voice reaching a shrill, whiny pitch. I'm a small business owner. I have overhead. I have insurance. If you have insurance, provide me the policy number, I said, my voice icy. If you have a business license, provide me the registration number. I'll wait. Bart, why don't you see if Mr. Thorne has any of these professional documents in his possession, or if his entire business model is contained within the confines of his own imagination? Bird stepped toward the podium, and Mr. Thorne's posture folded like a cheap lawn chair. He started frantically digging through a beat-up briefcase. His movements hurried and disorganized. It was the visual equivalent of a sinking ship. I have them at the office, he mumbled, not looking up. I forgot to bring the folder with my credentials. Of course you did, I said, a dry, sharp laugh escaping my lips. You forgot your credentials. You lost your receipts. You made a verbal agreement that nobody else heard. And you somehow managed to charge cash for $5,000 worth of work that doesn't exist. You're a very busy man, Mr. Thorne. It's a wonder you have time to do any construction at all. I shifted my focus back to Mrs. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling, did he ever provide you with a certificate of insurance or even a basic breakdown of the costs? Never, Judge, she replied. He told me he had a preferred vendor relationship with a supplier, which is why he couldn't give me the invoices. He said it would ruin his margins. Margins, I echoed, shaking my head. The only thing this man has margins for is his own profit. This is a scam, plain and simple. And the fact that he has the gall to stand here and argue about a verbal agreement is an insult to every legitimate contractor who actually does the work and follows the law. I looked at Thorne, who was now sweating profusely. The neon yellow polo didn't look quite so professional anymore. It looked like a uniform for incompetence. Mr. Thorne, do you have any photos of the work you claim to have done? Any documentation at all other than the ones you claim are at the office? I have photos on my phone, he said, pulling it out with a desperate, jerky movement. He swiped through a few, but they were all close-ups of random tiles and pieces of wood, none of which showed the actual custom island he was claiming he'd built. That's a tile, Mr. Thorne, I said, my voice dropping to a low, rhythmic cadence. That is not a custom island. If you want to convince me of the value of your labor, you need to show me the result. You haven't shown me anything except a series of failures. Stop, stop, stop! I waved a hand at him as if I was swatting away a particularly persistent fly. Don't you dare try to lecture me on the art of construction with a series of blurry photos of baseboards. You're not an artist, sir. You're a man who, by his own admission, tore apart a woman's kitchen and left it in a state of ruin, all while demanding money you haven't earned. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but I didn't even blink. I leaned forward, the weight of the bench beneath me feeling as solid as the truth itself. Do you have any idea how many people come into this room, just like you, convinced that their word is gold? And yet, here you are, without a single piece of paper to back up your claims, without a single receipt, and without a single professional credential that isn't currently sitting in your imaginary office. I turned my head to Mrs. Sterling, who was standing there, the personification of patience pushed to its limit. Mrs. Sterling, did he ever provide you with a written estimate, anything at all that outlined the costs? Just the initial quote, Judge, she said, her voice steady. $12,000. He wrote that on the back of a restaurant napkin on the first day. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half growl. A napkin! Well, that's clearly the gold standard for construction contracts, isn't it? I'm sure if we checked the archives of the greatest architectural firms in history, we'd find all their plans sketched out on the back of a grease-stained napkin from a diner. The gallery chuckled, and I didn't stop them. The absurdity of it was too much to ignore. Thorne, meanwhile, was turning a shade of red that clashed horribly with his neon yellow shirt. He looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole in the floorboards. Mr. Thorne, I said, my voice dropping back to that icy, conversational tone that always signals the beginning of the end. You claim you are a general contractor? You claim you have overhead? You claim you have insurance. And yet, when asked for the bare minimum of professional documentation, you come up empty-handed. Do you know what that makes you in the eyes of this court? It makes you a liability. I did the work, he insisted, though his voice had lost all its conviction. I put in the labor. You can't just ignore the fact that I gutted the kitchen. Oh, I'm not ignoring it, I snapped. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at these photos. You didn't gut the kitchen, Mr. Thorne. You destroyed it. You created a hazard. You left a homeowner with a room that is literally unusable. And you expect to be paid for the privilege of creating that disaster? That's not labor. That's vandalism. Vandalism? He stammered, his eyes widening. That's an accusation. It's an observation I corrected. When you take money from someone, promise them a functional living space, and then abandon the project because you decided you wanted more money without a shred of proof that you earned it, you have broken your contract. You have failed your duty of care. And in my courtroom, you pay for your failures. I picked up the file and looked at the numbers again. $7,000. It was a modest amount for a complete kitchen renovation, but for Mrs. Sterling, it was the difference between a home and a construction site. Mrs. Sterling, did you hire someone else to come in and fix what he left behind? Yes, Judge, she said. I had to hire a licensed contractor to come in, remove his substandard work, and rebuild the kitchen from the studs. It cost me $10,000. I looked back at Thorne. $10,000. That's what it cost her to clean up your mess. And you have the audacity to stand there and demand $5,000 more? You are lucky she's only suing you for $7,000. If I were her, I'd be suing you for the full 10. I can't afford that, he blurted out. I have my own expenses. If I pay that, my business will go under. If your business model depends on scamming homeowners out of their savings, then your business should go under, I barked. I have no sympathy for a small business owner whose primary strategy is theft. You are the reason people are terrified to hire contractors. You are the reason the industry has a bad name. You are a stain on your profession. He was quiet now, his head hung low, the bravado completely extinguished. He looked less like a contractor and more like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I'm going to make this very simple for you, I said, picking up my pen. I am finding for the plaintiff, Mrs. Sterling, in the full amount of $7,000. You will pay it immediately, and you will consider yourself fortunate that I am not referring this case to the state licensing board for a full investigation into your so-called contracting business. You can't do that, he whispered, a desperate, final attempt at resistance. I can do whatever the law allows me to do, I said, staring him down. And the law allows me to hold you accountable for the damage you've caused. Now, stand up straight, stop the sniveling, and get out of my courtroom before I decide that $7,000 isn't enough. The look on Thorne's face was priceless, a perfect blend of humiliation, genuine terror, and the pathetic realization that his little game had hit a brick wall at full speed. He didn't say another word. He didn't even attempt to puff out his chest or mention his imaginary office again. He just scrambled to gather his tattered briefcase, his hands fumbling so badly he dropped his pen twice. It was the frantic, undignified retreat of a man who realized that for the first time in his life, he couldn't talk his way out of the hole he'd dug. Bird, I said, barely glancing at the door as Thorne scurried toward it like a cockroach under a sudden light. Make sure he finds the exit. And check the hall to ensure he doesn't leave any more of his professional debris on the floor. Bird chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that filled the room. Don't worry, Judge. He's moving fast enough on his own. I didn't watch him go. People like Marcus Thorne are a dime a dozen in my courtroom, and they all follow the same predictable arc. The arrogance, the desperate lies, the victim complex, and finally, the cowardly retreat. Once the door clicked shut, the energy in the room shifted instantly. Mrs. Sterling, who had been standing there with the weight of that unfinished, hazardous kitchen on her shoulders for months, let out a long, shuddering breath. Her shoulders dropped, and for the first time, she looked like she might actually be able to sleep tonight. Mrs. Sterling, I said, my voice softening just enough to show I was human, though I never let my guard down. You did the right thing. Never let anyone bully you into a verbal agreement. If they don't have the paperwork, they don't have a deal. It's that simple. You saved yourself from further catastrophe by calling his bluff. Thank you, Your Honor, she said, her voice thick with relief. I honestly thought he was going to win. He sounded so confident when he was yelling at me. Confidence is the cheapest commodity on earth, I replied, tapping my ledger. Anyone can sound confident while they're lying. The truth doesn't need to be loud, and it certainly doesn't need to be aggressive. It just needs to be supported by facts. You had the facts. He had a napkin. You were always going to win. She nodded, wiped a single tear from her cheek, and began gathering her photos. She looked around the courtroom, not with the trepidation she'd arrived with, but with a sense of closure. She walked toward the exit, and I turned my attention back to the mountain of files sitting on my desk. I picked up the next folder, feeling the familiar, crisp weight of it in my hands. Another case, another dispute, another set of people who thought that their personal grievances were the most important thing in the world. I don't get tired of it. Some people ask me how I keep the energy up day after day listening to the same tired stories of greed and incompetence. The answer is simple. I love the truth. I love the process of dragging it out, kicking and screaming, until it's standing right in the center of the room where everyone can see it. Most people in this world spend their lives avoiding the truth, wrapping themselves in layers of self-justification and convenience. They lie to their partners, they lie to their employers, and they lie to themselves. But they can't lie to me. I've developed an internal radar for deception that's more reliable than any polygraph machine ever invented. It's in the eyes, it's in the hesitation, it's in the way they try to control the narrative. The moment they step into this courtroom, I'm not just listening to their words, I'm listening to what they're trying to hide. I adjusted my glasses, feeling the sharp, focused energy that comes with a fresh start. My bailiff, Bird, was back at his post, his face unreadable, his presence a constant, steadying force. He knows the drill. He knows that when I get that look in my eye, it's because I've already spotted the weakness in the next person's story. Are you ready, Bird? I asked, not looking up from the folder. Ready when you are, Judge, he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. I looked at the paperwork for the next case, a dispute over a car purchase, a friend who sold a lemon, and a claim of hidden defects. Classic. These people always think they're special, that their situation is unique, that they found a loophole in the system. They think they're the first ones to discover that friendship and money don't mix. They're never the first. They're just the latest in a long line of people who fail to read the fine print. I took a deep breath, the air in the courtroom feeling crisp and clean now that the stench of Thorne's dishonesty had been cleared away. I straightened my robe, squared my shoulders, and felt the absolute authority of the bench. I am the firewall, I am the arbiter, and I am the one who makes sure that at the end of the day, justice isn't just an idea, it's a reality. Bring them in, I commanded, my voice firm and clear. I felt the surge of anticipation. The day was moving, the docket was shrinking, and I was exactly where I belonged, right at the helm, steering the ship of justice through a sea of human stupidity. Let them come. I'm ready for whatever brand of nonsense they've brought with them. I have the facts, I have the law, and I have the patience of a saint for the truth and the patience of a statue for the lies. The heavy doors groaned open, and in walked the two litigants for the next case. On the left was a man named Arthur Pringle, looking like he'd been rolled in a dumpster, sporting a baseball cap and a nervous, twitching demeanor. On the right was his former friend, Marcus Vane, who looked like he'd just stepped out of a used car lot, slicked back hair and a suit that smelled faintly of desperation and pine-scented air freshener. They were fighting over a 2012 sedan that Pringle claimed was a reliable runner, and Vane claimed was a ticking time bomb on wheels. Mr. Pringle, Mr. Vane, I said, not even waiting for them to reach the podiums. I hope you both had a pleasant morning, because the rest of your day is going to be incredibly unpleasant. Mr. Pringle, you are the defendant here, but don't get too comfortable. In my courtroom, everyone is on trial. Tell me, did you sell this man a vehicle that you knew was held together by prayer and duct tape? Pringle started to stammer, his fingers fidgeting with the brim of his hat. Your Honor, it was a as-is sale. We were friends. He knew the car had some miles on it, but it ran fine when I handed him the keys. He drove it off the lot. My driveway himself. A friend, I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. The kind of friend who sells a lemon to a buddy and then hides behind an as-is clause? That's the kind of friend who deserves to be sued. Mr. Vane, tell me what happened the moment you tried to drive this reliable runner home. Vane stepped up, his voice oily and rehearsed. Judge, I didn't even make it 3 blocks. The transmission started grinding like a coffee mill, the check engine light turned into a disco strobe, and the car literally died in the middle of an intersection. I had to have it towed. When the mechanic opened the hood, he told me the engine block was cracked and someone had covered the warning lights with black electrical tape. I felt my jaw tighten. Black electrical tape. It's the ultimate lazy man's solution to a problem you don't want to solve. It's a confession without a signature. Mr. Pringle, I said, my voice dropping to a low, ominous growl, did you put black electrical tape over the warning lights on the dashboard of that car? He went pale. The twitching stopped instantly. He knew that I knew. He tried to look at the ceiling, then at his shoes, anything to avoid the laser focus. I was aiming at his forehead. I warned. I might have put a piece of tape over a light that was flickering because of a sensor issue. It didn't mean the car was broken. A sensor issue, I laughed. A sharp, cynical sound. And I suppose the cracked engine block was just a cosmetic flaw too? You sold a man a piece of junk, you actively sabotaged the warning system so he wouldn't see it, and then you tried to hide behind the as-is law. That isn't a sale, Mr. Pringle. That is fraud. But he checked it out. He drove it. Pringle shouted, his voice cracking with the desperation of the cornered. He had every opportunity to have a mechanic look at it. He trusted you, I barked back. He trusted a man he called his friend. And because he trusted you, he didn't pay for an inspection. You weaponized his friendship against him to unload your garbage. Do you have any idea how repulsive that is? If you wanted to get rid of the car, you should have sent it to a scrapyard. Instead, you sent it to a friend. You're not a businessman, Arthur. You're a bottom feeder. Vane started to chime in, his voice rising in an attempt to get his share of the anger, but I held up my hand, stopping him instantly. I don't need a chorus to help me deliver justice. Mr. Vane, keep quiet until I ask you a question. Mr. Pringle, you have 5 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't enter a judgment against you for every penny he paid for that car, plus the cost of the tow and the diagnostic fees from the mechanic who found your little electrical tape discovery. Pringle's shoulders slumped. He looked like a man who just had the floor pulled out from under him. I don't have the money to pay it back right now, Judge. I spent the cash on rent. Then you should have thought about that before you committed fraud, I said, reaching for my pen. I don't care about your rent, Mr. Pringle. I care about the fact that you deliberately lied to a man you claim to be friends with. You didn't just sell him a car, you sold him a lie. And in this courtroom, the price of a lie is very high. I looked over at Bird. Get the mechanic's report from Mr. Vane. I want to see the photos of that tape. Bird retrieved the documents and brought them to my bench. I stared at the photo, a clear, damning shot of a piece of black tape neatly covering the check engine light. It was so brazen, so stupidly simple, it was almost laughable. Almost. Mr. Pringle, I said, holding the photo up for the cameras, is this your handiwork? Did you, with your own 2 hands, place this tape here to mask the fact that you were selling a death trap? He was silent. He just stood there, his head bowed, the fight completely drained out of him. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the audience was leaning in, waiting for the inevitable. I'm waiting, sir. Did you do it? Yes, he whispered. Speak up! I want the record to be crystal clear. Did you sell him a broken car and hide the warning light with tape? Yes, he said, his voice barely audible. Pathetic, I muttered, shaking my head. Absolutely pathetic. Mr. Vane, you're getting your money back. Mr. Pringle, you're getting a life lesson, and it's going to be a very expensive one. The judgment is for the purchase price, the towing fees, and the mechanic's diagnostic fee. You pay it, or you'll be hearing from the sheriff. Now, get out of my sight, both of you. And Pringle, don't ever call yourself a friend to anyone ever again. You don't have the capacity for it. The courtroom was still buzzing, a low hum of collective shock at the sheer unmitigated stupidity of Pringle's electrical tape hack. It's the kind of thing that makes you lose faith in humanity for about 5 minutes. Right before you remember that I'm here specifically to filter out the idiots and ensure they don't get away with their little games. I didn't give them a moment to argue. I watched as Pringle, shoulders hunched like a beaten dog, shuffled out the door, followed by Vane, who, frankly, should have known better than to buy a car from a man who wore a baseball cap to a legal proceeding, but that's a lesson for another day. I turned my attention back to my desk, smoothing out the next folder. The rhythm of the room was relentless, a metronome of human failing. I caught Bard's eye, and he just gave a slow, deliberate nod. He knows. We've seen enough electrical tape, enough back-of-the-napkin contracts, and enough verbal agreements to last 10 lifetimes. But the moment you start letting it get to you, the moment you start thinking, I've heard it all, is the moment you stop being effective. And I am nothing if not effective. Next, I said, my voice cutting through the lingering tension like a warm knife through butter. The doors opened, and a pair walked in that looked like they belonged in a corporate boardroom, not my courtroom. They were sharp, polished, and carried themselves with the kind of calculated precision that usually signals a dispute over something substantial, or, more often than not, a dispute over a principle so petty it makes your eyes water. They were brothers fighting over their late father's estate, specifically the contents of a storage unit. I adjusted my glasses, feeling that familiar, sharp focus snapping into place. This wasn't going to be a case of duct tape or napkins. This was going to be a case of family pride, hidden agendas, and the kind of resentment that builds up over 30 years of holiday dinners. Sit, I commanded, gesturing to the podiums. I didn't wait for them to start their rehearsed introductions. I had the file open, I had the inventory list in front of me, and I had already spotted the discrepancy. Mr. David and Mr. Samuel Reed, your brothers, you're arguing over the contents of a storage locker left behind by your father. I have the inventory list here. It's an interesting document. It lists everything from vintage comic books to tools, but it conspicuously lacks any mention of the coin collection that both of you keep referencing in your pretrial statements. David, the older brother, stood up immediately. He had a tight, controlled posture. Your Honor, that's exactly the issue. The coin collection was the most valuable asset in the unit. Samuel had access to the key 3 months before I did. I believe he cleared it out before the inventory was ever taken. Samuel, the younger one, sneered, his hands gripped white on the podium. That's a lie, David. You were the one who insisted on going to the storage unit alone to catalog the items. You probably sold them and are trying to frame me to cover your tracks. I held up a hand. The sound of their bickering was like static. Stop, both of you. I didn't bring you here to watch you trade accusations like children on a playground. I brought you here to get the truth. And the truth is usually hidden in the paperwork you think I'm too lazy to read. I tapped the file. I have the storage facility's security logs here. They track every single entry, every single keycard swipe, and every single time the unit door was opened. David, you accessed the unit on the 12th, 14th, and 15th. Samuel, you accessed it on the 18th. And then there's an entry on the 20th by a third party, a local coin dealer. The courtroom went deadly quiet. David's face turned ashen. Samuel's jaw dropped. It's the look I live for, the look of two people who thought they were the smartest players in the game, only to realize the house had been watching their every move. You both seem to have forgotten that storage facilities, like courts, keep records, I said, my voice dropping to that low, rhythmic, dangerous hum. Neither one of you is the victim here. You're both thieves. You both tried to loot your father's estate, and you both tried to use me as a referee for your little contest of greed. I didn't need to hear their pathetic excuses. I didn't need to hear who swiped which coin. I had the logs. I had the dealer's receipt. And I had the absolute, unwavering certainty that neither of these men deserved a dime of the value they had squabbled over. This case is not about who gets the coins, I announced, leaning over the bench. This case is about the fact that both of you were in breach of your fiduciary duty as executors of your father's estate. And since I cannot trust either one of you, I am ordering the entire remaining estate, including the proceeds of the coins you already sold, to be turned over to a court-appointed administrator. You get nothing. You had your chance to handle this with integrity, and you both chose greed. They started to protest, their voices rising in tandem, but I pounded my gavel, a sound that echoed like a final verdict. I am finished. You have ruined your father's legacy with your petty, pathetic squabbling. You have lost the right to manage his affairs. You are done. Get out of my courtroom before I find a way to hold you both in contempt for wasting my time with your miserable, self-serving lies. They didn't even look at each other as they hurried out. The door slammed shut. I sat back, the adrenaline finally beginning to subside, replaced by that quiet, cold satisfaction that comes from cleaning up a mess. Next, I said. My voice was calm, my eyes were sharp, and the gavel was ready. There was still a whole afternoon left to go, and I had every intention of making sure the truth won every single time. The silence in the room was almost thick enough to cut with a knife. Bird walked over to the stack of files, his face completely unreadable, though I knew he was enjoying the spectacle as much as I was. It's always a special kind of disappointment when you see brothers turn into vultures the moment their father's body is cold. Greed doesn't just make people stupid. It makes them predictable. It makes them sloppy. They think they can outmaneuver the truth with a few whispered lies and some clever sleight of hand at a storage facility, and then they walk into my courtroom expecting me to be their accomplice. They never learn, Bird, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, though it still carried that sharp, crisp edge. They think they're the first ones to ever try and hide assets. They think they're the first ones to lie to a judge. They're just the latest in a very long line of disappointment. I didn't wait for him to respond. I was already moving on. The Reed brothers were yesterday's news. I picked up the next file, a dispute between a wedding photographer and a bride who claimed her photos were ruined because of the lighting. This was going to be another exercise in vanity and entitlement, and I was already looking forward to cutting through the nonsense. People think their special day is the center of the universe, and in their own little bubble, maybe it is. But when they walk into this room, they aren't the center of the universe. They're just another party to a contract. If you sign a contract with a photographer, you don't get to demand a refund because you didn't like the color of the sunset. You get what you paid for, and if the work is professional, you're stuck with it. I took a deep breath, the air in the courtroom feeling crisp and clean again. I don't need a break. I don't need a lunch hour to process these things. I thrive on the clarity of a closed case. It's a purge. Every lie I identify, every scam I shut down, every piece of entitlement I squash, it's like sweeping the floor of a dusty room. Eventually, you get down to the bare wood, and that's where the truth lives. Bird, I said, my voice snapping back into that sharp, professional command. Are the parties for the photography case ready? They've been waiting, Judge, he replied, gesturing toward the door. Then let's not keep them in suspense. They're probably already practicing their upset expressions. I straightened my robe, feeling the weight of the fabric on my shoulders, a constant reassuring reminder of the gravity of the position. I'm not here to be their friend, I'm not here to be their therapist, and I'm certainly not here to validate their grievances. I'm here to be the wall that keeps the nonsense out and the justice in. I sat upright, my posture impeccable, my eyes tracking the door as it began to swing open. The wedding photographer, a nervous-looking man with a heavy camera bag, walked in first. Behind him was the bride, her face a carefully constructed mask of indignation. She had clearly spent a lot of time preparing for this performance. I watched them both as they approached the podiums. I didn't see people. I saw a contract, a dispute, and a resolution waiting to happen. I felt the familiar, sharp thrill of the challenge. Let them start their song and dance. Let them throw their accusations and their emotional outbursts at the bench. None of it matters. None of it sticks. Welcome, I said, my voice dry as desert air. Please, try to keep the hysterics to a minimum. I'm interested in facts. I'm interested in contracts. And I'm interested in getting you both out of my sight before the sun goes down. Mr. Photographer, start by telling me why this woman is so unhappy with your work. And Mrs. Bride, try to contain yourself while he's speaking. You'll have your turn, and I promise you I'll be just as impatient with you as I am with him. The courtroom was poised, the cameras were rolling, and I was exactly where I needed to be. Another hour, another lie to dismantle, and another step closer to a day of pure, unfiltered truth. It's not just a job, it's a calling, and I answer it every single time.